Okay, this is great. This is the cover of Grant Cameron's new book, Contact Modalities, The Keys to the Universe, in which Grant has done so much work. And I really wanted to talk to him. And I know this is rushed, but this is the book that I've been waiting for a long time, Grant, because the ETs, whoever they may be, are not speaking in English, Chinese, Italian, and all that. There are different modalities for contact, and you've been awaiting a long time to do this kind of work.
Yeah, well, it's been a long time coming for us as well. Des and I have been working on this book for probably a couple of years, and you are right that the ETs are, if they wanted to land and tell us what's going on, they would directly tell us what's going on. But what they have done, according to what I think, is they have gone through different types of people, different types of modalities, and in a lot of ways what they're doing is sort of indirect, where they're giving you the message, they're making us think. And so what we did in the book is we sort of set up a scenario where we said, there's a lot of different people who are in contact with a lot of different, I guess you'd call it higher consciousness. And I guess I got to clarify that first. What people think is that we have a bunch of nouns. So we have consciousness, we have material stuff, we have levels, we have colors. And what I would say is, no, we don't have any of that. We don't have, all we have is one thing. It's all consciousness. Everything is made out of consciousness. There is no, I think Jacques Vallée said to you, you know, this idea that it is not solid. It is not the world you think it is. Matter, according to me, is just very densely low vibrating consciousness, and that people at some point are able to get out of the left brain. And that's what the whole book, I think, according to me, is based upon the fact that if you're able to shut down your rational analytical left brain, you're able to make contact with beings, with angels, with all sorts of consciousness. But all the consciousness is still the same thing. So it's, the analogy would be the ocean. So we're at the deep, dark part of the ocean. We're totally clued out. We don't know what's going on. And at some point, you're able to shut down this rational analytical part of your brain, and suddenly you float up sort of higher into the water. And the higher you get in the water, the less dark it becomes, the more light it becomes, and the more you can see. And so some people who have contact with beings are able to sort of float up out of the darkness. They're able to make contact, get messages, and then they float back down and they say, guess what I saw? And everybody goes, no, you didn't see that. No, that's not true. You just made that up. And so that's what I say. It's all consciousness. There is no time. There is no space. There may not even be an out there, which is one of the things that a lot of people who have near-death experiences talk about, that that's what they're told. There's no out there. It's all within ourselves. And I think Stephen Greer even has a thing where he talks about the universe is folded within each of us. There's only one thing. There's one electron. There's just one thing. It's not like separate objects in space that are interacting with each other. And so the whole modality idea was to find these people who are able to make the contact and then listen to them. And what we've done in the UFO world is we've basically gone to sightings. So we say, oh, what color is it? How fast is it going? How many are there? Where are they? All this sort of stuff. And we have totally ignored the contactees, the people who are interacting with the phenomena. So somebody will come up, Adamski will come up, or people starting in the 1950s said, they told me this, they told me that, and they go, it's just anecdotal. You can't believe it. You can't prove it, whatever. And we want scientific stuff. We want analysis. We want photos. We want all this kind of stuff. And so what's happened is that the people who have the message from the intelligence behind the UFO phenomena have been totally ignored. And I say, until you listen to the people who are actually interacting with the phenomena, you are totally wasting your time, because you can look at all the sightings you want. You can look at all the photographs you want, all the videos you want. You can look at all that kind of stuff. All that's going to tell you is, yeah, something's going on. And it probably isn't us. It's probably not us flying around. But other than that, you really cannot tell who they are, why they're here, what the message is, because you can't tell that by watching something fly around in the sky.
No, you can't. And the thing that's very interesting is there's different modalities. For instance, when I was having the experience with Ricardo Gonzalez, my phone was auto dialing somebody else. And
Yeah.
I was not doing that. And that phone was auto dialing me when it decided to auto dial me. And the thing is that all that served is to get our attention.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things that are happening, which are like bizarre things, if you want to address this, is just to get your attention.
Yeah, I call it the theory of wow. I may even do a book on that eventually. And that's where I say, if you're an advanced non-human intelligence and you want to interact with beings who aren't really paying attention, what you want to do is, instead of coming down and saying, okay, we're here to, as my expression is, we're here to bring you freedom and democracy, Jesus and McDonald's, and everybody goes, get out of here, like, leave me alone. And so what they do is they do this, what I call the theory of wow. And it's almost like, if you have a school and the grade 1 kids, they say, how would you interact with these people on earth? They're not listening. They're off doing their own thing. And the kids say, well, let's put objects down there and let's fly them around and put lights on them and all different colors of lights. And they go, okay, so that's what they do. And then you put crop circles. Why would you do a crop circle? That's like the grade 2 class. We're going to put down these crop circles, and it's not a message. We want a message where they land on the White House lawn and they speak English and they spell out what they're going to do. They're doing it indirectly through very weird things. Because when your cell phone rings, and I've had this too happen as well, a lot of people have had this experience, it's so bizarre that you go, wow, how did that happen? And it drags you down the rabbit hole. You can't avoid it. And so I think in a lot of ways they're doing this. Or you take the example of the Phoenix Lights. Why would you take a craft that is a mile across and fly it 100 feet over the ground over Phoenix, Arizona? I mean, that's just to say, wow, look at this. Or if you take the latest obsession with the UFO community is the Nimitz sighting. So they say, oh, the Nimitz sighting and this and that. And Jacques Vallée says, the Nimitz was just a UFO sighting 15 years ago. It's time to get over it. And that is all it was. It was a UFO sighting. So you have the object, according to the reports, the object sat there for a week. It was hovering in this spot for a week until they finally went and chased it. And they're going, hello, we're over here. Zogar, turn the lights on. They can't see us. Turn the lights on. And then finally they go and they make the chase. And then they do that big movement. You heard the movement. They're at 80,000 feet and they drop down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. Now, what is that? Is that the pre-abduction maneuver, or is that like, what are they doing? Why would you drop so fast down to the ocean? Because they're saying, watch this. And the thing goes down. It goes, holy cow. And then it's almost like then the jets are coming back again. And they say, oh, Zogar, go under the water and make big bubbles under the water. And so the craft goes under and makes these bubbles. And they go, look at the water. Look at it. It looks like something sinking. And the story is now being told by everybody. Everybody keeps telling this story about these things. But in the end, it's just a UFO sighting. It's the same as the sighting I had or the sightings that you've had or and I say you've got to go past that to sightings like you had, where you're actually standing 20 yards from an ET, and you can actually see him, and he's actually putting messages to the people in the Zendra. Those are the things you've got to get, because the sighting stuff is very interesting, but it's just to get our attention, to let us know the fact. I think there was even an expression that Jacques Vallée apparently had said, I haven't heard him quoted, but it said, it may just be a giant kabuki theater, and the only message is we aren't alone. And that they're using all these different things, and they're just getting our attention, they're dragging us down, and once it's got your attention, then it's like, you know what it's like. Once you're down the UFO rabbit hole, you can't get out. I mean, you just, and the weird things keep happening, and you keep chasing it, and eventually they get us to go. Instead of coming to us and saying, this is the way it is, they make us figure it out. We're sitting there, we're trying to put the pieces together, and when we put the pieces together, then nothing's going to change our mind, because we are the ones that put it together.
Exactly. And it's more fun that way, because then we figure it out and it's like one big puzzle, and it doesn't have to have any meaning. It's just, I can't even name the things, the coincidences I've had, especially this last year. And people say, oh, it's synchronicity and coincidences. No, we're interacting with something that we don't know what it is, that is saying, okay, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
You're on the right path. This is the way we communicate with you. We're not going to write you a letter. We're not going to talk to you face to face. But then all at once, you have a coincidence and you're going, oh, how did that happen? Well, you just plugged in. You plugged into the water. I love that metaphor, because consciousness is that water, and half the fish in there don't know they're conscious.
Yeah, they're down in the depths of the water. That's why I say, so what I say is there's different levels. So if you have like a medium or a contactee, it's almost like you have people who can play music, and then you have musicians. So some people are able to get a little bit higher in the water and see a little bit more. Some people are actually able to get almost to the surface where the light is right there. It's almost like the near-death experience, where if you see the survey of people who are contactees who claim they've had intelligence contact, 40% of them say at one point during their experience, they knew the answer to everything in the universe. And I'm going like, why would you not talk to these people? I mean, they knew the answer at one point to everything in the universe. Why would you not talk to them? And those are people who are able to, like real musicians, like protege, real high-level musicians who are able to get really high up. So I would say that just because you're, say, a medium or a channeler or whatever, doesn't mean you're at the same level as everybody else. You can get people like Ricardo Gonzalez who are higher up than just an average person. They've got a better ability to shut down. And we do the shutdown by meditation, or we do it through being in a circle, like when Ricardo does the circle. What we're doing in the circle is we're raising vibration. So you do the mantras, and you're raising your vibration, your consciousness up. They're bringing their consciousness down, and you meet in between. If you don't do the mantras, if you don't raise the consciousness, nothing's going to happen. The same thing happens when you see the people who are doing seances. It's the same thing. They do the singing, they do all this kind of stuff, and they said they can tell when there's going to be a contact, when there's not going to be a contact. There's these protocols that you've got to realize that you have to get the conscious analytical brain out of the way. We got to get us out of the way, almost like the healer. What you want to do is get the healer out of the way so the energy can flow through. You want to get the person out of the way, because what the left brain is doing, it's creating huge amounts of noise. And it's the ability through meditation, through getting yourself out of the equation, to quiet that left brain and to pick up the signal. And the signal is there for everybody. And you can see with savants, with very high level contactees, that they are able to shut that whole thing and really get a really good signal, where the majority of us have this noise going on, the little voices talking in our heads, and we think, no, there's no signal. No, there's no signal. What is happening is in my head. And so you get that, and then you get this idea of consciousness. That consciousness, it's all consciousness. And so we'll have the thing where we say, okay, there's consciousness put into the body, and the body's not conscious. Animals aren't conscious. Plants aren't conscious. But anybody who's had a near-death experience, or anybody who has done the high-dose psychedelics will tell you, my ego was crushed. That's left brain. Your ego is completely gone. And I suddenly realized everything's alive and conscious. So the whole universe is conscious. The beings are at that high level. So they're high up in the water, and they come down and lower into the water. But we have to raise ourselves up, because what's happening in the UFO community now is we're just doing the sighting stuff. We're never going to do it. We've done it for 73 years. We will continue to do it for another 73 years, and we'll still be saying, are UFOs real? It's like, get over it. It's like Jacques Vallée said. It's a UFO saying, get over it. Let's move on to the next sighting. UFOs exist. Let's figure out what they're doing here. And that's what you and I and a few other people, there's not that many people who are doing it, who are saying, forget about the sightings, forget about the kind of stuff. Consciousness is the link. And until you get consciousness, you are completely lost. You are never going to figure it out.
Yeah, well, the thing about this book, and it does coincide with a lot of Jacques Vallée's research, is the thing about this book is you include all psychic phenomenon, orbs, all the things that everybody discounts as part of a manifestation of consciousness. It's like being in a classroom, and you got to study all these different, modalities or books or classes in order to graduate. And then when you graduate, what the graduation is, and I'm just going to go there because I think that's what the graduation is a realization of who you are and what your relationship is to the whole entire thing. But you can't get there just by going straight there. You got to take all these classes. So your modality book, which I can't wait to read, and I can touch it right now because I was telling you I did an experiment with orbs. Yeah. I'm when I was in Italy, I was invited to speak in this conference that was about Roll. Roll was the greatest psychic ever. He did a lot of work in Northern Italy. And when I was sitting there with the woman, the journalist that knew him, all the pictures had these circles, and she thought it was damage. So she said, look at these pictures. They're all ruined. And I said, no, I'm sorry. Roll knew that we were doing this conference, and the manifestation of the intelligences around him and his acknowledgement that you were doing the conference is filled with orbs. And she finally started, this journalist started looking at orbs only because she thought it was damage.
Yeah.
And they were not pieces of dust. And then the other one that I'm going to talk about really quickly, because it'll interest you, is this woman kept taking pictures of orbs. And so we went to Sardinia together to a sacred spot. I had my camera, she had her camera. She started taking pictures. We could see the display right away, filled with orbs. So I took her camera and she took my camera because I thought it was the camera. I took nothing. You know, my picture was regular. She took my camera and it was filled with orbs. So at that time, my personal thought was, it's an interrelationship between the photographer and what is out there. It is between the 10 people could take pictures and only one gets the orb. What do you think?
That's exactly what it is. I mentioned just before we started, I talked to my sister. My sister, I always make the joke, my two sisters have taken more pictures than Kodak. My older sister, we had this photograph here. We're trying to figure out who this girl is behind me here, that from a spirit painter, which is one of the modalities. And so we're trying to figure out, so I brought my sister in because she's an expert on the family, on who's who, and she's got 60,000 photographs on her computer. So I said, Pat, come and you got to tell me who this person is going to be. She said, no, I don't think it's anybody in our family. And so I said to her, I said, well, you got 60,000 photographs. How many photographs have you got of orbs? She says, oh, I got one of the Cortina many years ago. And it wasn't even digital. Now they're saying, oh, it's because you got a digital camera. And so it wasn't digital. She had 1 out of 60,000. I had talked to Sid Goldberg, our friend Sid Goldberg. I said, Sid, because Sid had in my last orb presentation, Sid came in there and he showed, I think, 4 photographs of orbs, but they were all with him in the photograph. I said, okay, Sid, how many photographs have you taken and how many orb photographs have you got that you took? And he said, I've taken between 50 and 70,000 photographs, and he thought he had maybe 10 orb photographs. And so you can see, it's not the person. You can get a person. We had a couple of people on my first orb broadcast. These guys have taken thousands. They can literally pick up, and you see some of the photographs where the people are standing with their hands in the air because they're posing for the photographs, and there's orbs all over the place. And this guy he takes the camera, and then suddenly I get inundated with these people from around the world. One from Hong Kong, Neil Gould's friend in Hong Kong, Stan Ho. He's got thousands of photographs. He's got a woman from Australia. She's got thousands of photographs, and it's the person with the camera. So what you got to do in this field is you got to suddenly start to believe the people that most people are just telling the truth. If they had an experience, they had an encounter in the 1950s or whatever, you sit there and you can be a little bit skeptical, but you got to realize, like, most people are probably just telling the truth, that it is what it is. So I started to get these people, and they would send me these photographs, and I probably have a half a dozen people who basically have 1,000 or more orb photographs. And then I started looking, and what you do is you track it. So you assume these people are basically telling you the truth. They may be misinterpreting it, but they're telling you the truth. And I started to put together a pattern, and I got a very distinct pattern where you sit there, and it's what you pointed out. It's the person with the camera. If you can change the cameras, the person with the camera will take it. And then you get this thing where they say, oh, it's parts of dust. But eventually, as these people started sending me these photographs, suddenly I realized that there was this mist that would appear in the photograph, and it looked like a ghost type figure coming in. And all these people started sending me these things. They'd send me the photographs of the orbs, and then there'd be 1 or 2 photographs, and I'd say, what do you think that is? And they'd say, oh, I think it's a being coming in. And I realized that everybody eventually had some of those photographs of the mist, that the mist are associated with the orbs. So I've got now a catalog of 15 different things. So if a person's saying they're taking orbs, they're going to fit into a certain category that they'll say this, they'll say this, they'll say this, they'll say this. But until you've looked at all these people, put all the evidence together and looked at it, you don't realize there's this pattern that they're all saying basically the same thing. They're telling the same story. And so that's what I think we have to do, is we have to listen to the people, forget about the sightings for a while, go to the people who are interacting with the phenomena, and then you realize that they are using orb phenomena. They're using all these bizarre techniques to get our attention, to get us messages, but the messages are very indirect, because the left brain is very analytical, and it's language. Your language is in the left brain. So if I'm talking to you, we're talking, and you want to hear words, you want to hear nouns and stuff, but they're in the other brain. They're in the female brain. They're in the right brain. The right brain is images, it's sensations, it's all these kind of things. It's not language. So that's why you'll hear them say, we come to you in your dreams because now you're in our world. They live in the world of dreams. They live in the world of people in out-of-body experiences, near-death experience. So what you'll see is people have the encounters with the beings, and then suddenly they start having encounters with angels. And then you have this thing about manifestation that somebody, we had an interview, Desta and I had an interview last night with the woman who did all the research for Jeffrey Long, and he wrote the #1 best-selling book on near-death experiences. She did the research for him. And I asked her about this thing about, you hear about the sort of the evil alien or the evil whatever. And I said, okay, when you did all your near-death experience stuff, when the people were in that other world, I said, what about the evil? She said, it's always manifested. So if you have a bad near-death experience and you run up against an evil alien or a devil or whatever, that's your creation, because in that world, it's very plastic. You're creating the environment. So if you take fear into that world, you're going to create a fearful experience. And you see that kind of stuff where you see the manifestation coming across that we make up a lot of the world. And I remember Jacques Vallée would say that, this whole idea that the fairies and everything's all connected together, and it's just our manifest. I actually think he was nuts. I thought he was crazy. And
well, that book is Passport to Magonia, and that caused him a lot of problems. Because what he said is, you should study the history of how people think about this. This is not a 20th century thing. This goes back to the ancient days. And so he showed that, that there's manifestations of the paranormal, because he's into the paranormal. Like, for instance, personally, I do believe in fairies and little gnomes.
Yeah.
I think that in Ireland, they have that. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them flying around in Ireland, because that is the manifestation that the Irish have had, the leprechauns and everything. That doesn't come out of nowhere. They didn't make that up. That's part of their culture.
Sure. You can even see that in the UFO phenomena. People think, you've been around as long as I have in the UFO field, but people who just come in always think that what happened today happened before. And I keep saying to people, no, that's not the way it works. If you were there in 75 when it started for me, you realize it's not the same. So when you see 1890, what do the ships look like in 1890? The airships of the Western United States and the Midwest. They were like wooden ships with propellers, and these guys said we're from Mars, and they were landing, and there was 10,000 sightings. It wasn't 1 or 2 sightings, 10,000 sightings, and they're all made of wooden ships. And then you have, then it turns into the Foo Fighters. So the Foo Fighters were only there for a couple of years, and then the Foo Fighters went away. Well, where did the Foo Fighters go? And then the green fireballs came, and then the Adamski crafts were complete. They had the ball things under them, completely different. And then you had the flying saucers. Now it's triangles, and it's whatever you want to see. Even the thing with Betty and Barney Hill in the 1960s, Betty and Barney Hill saw crafts with windows around them. That does not happen anymore. Very few people report crafts with windows in them.
Exactly.
And if you see Betty and Barney Hill thing, they said they were wearing hats. They were wearing these little peak hats. It's like, well, why is an alien wearing a hat? I mean, they give you almost like these signs to say, pay attention. This is not what you think it is. And it's almost like they're turning the pages of a book and we're watching. Or like ground traces. You remember Stanton Friedman used to say, ground traces, this is the key evidence where it lands and it burns and leaves the tripod marks. That has not happened for 20 years. Now it's a completely different thing. Now it's a different phenomena.
Exactly.
They're leading us through this thing and they're raising our consciousness. But if we still stay back in 1947 and do the investigations we did in 47, we're not going to figure it out. There are these underlying patterns that show us that people are telling the truth and that the phenomena is changing as it goes along and it's getting more complex. The orb thing really didn't. I remember in 1975, I was so close to an orb, and we called them ground lights because the word orb was not even used in 1975. We didn't even know what it was. We called them ground lights, and I was so close to one I was going to jump on it. So I have an advantage that I know they exist because I was so close to one. I was going to jump on the thing, and I had an 8mm movie camera going while I was closing in on this thing. So that's what people have to realize, is that the phenomenon is changing and that there are people out there that have access to the field. Wherever these non-human intelligence are, whatever, they're up in a field that's all it is a higher vibrating field than we are. We're a very dense vibrating field. And so you'd even get stuff like one of the contact modalities is like the channeling. So Desta goes through a lot of work and she's taking all these courses. And then at one point they actually take her and they say, and to get into the theta state, where you get into the theta state just before you go to sleep, that's when the left brain is shutting down. So you're in your your sort of your beta state where you're very active and your brain is going, you go into the theta state between sleep and between awake. That's when you can get these images, and that's when a lot of inventions came. A lot of that stuff came during that state. So Desta learns to do it, and then suddenly these messages are coming, and they actually took her brain and said, "This is what it feels like," and she felt the vibration move down. So there's a lot of people like Desta who learn the technique, and you got to listen to these people. You got to tap into these people, and when you start looking at the messages, you see it's the same message, always the same message. Number one lesson of the universe: love is the basis of the universe. You can take it from near-death experience, from people who've been on board ships. Doesn't matter who you have. It goes across all these different modalities. Everybody will always say, love is the basis of the universe, and oneness. The number one message of all the experiences in the free survey, if you're familiar, was oneness. And if you get that, you get an out-of-body experience, you get a near-death experience, you get it in psychedelics. I suddenly realized I was one with the universe. Everything's alive, everything's conscious, and I'm one. It's the same message. And all the modalities are going to the same spot, to the spot where there's only one thing. We're all one consciousness. We're sparks of the divine. Love is the basis, and we're all connected. And that's what we have to realize. If we want to save the world, we have to realize that we are all one thing. We are all connected. As long as we're doing this rape, pillage, kill, and steal stuff, where whoever's got the most toys when they die wins, and it's me versus you, good versus bad, we're going to destroy the world. That's the message that the intelligence behind the UFO phenomena is trying to get across. Stop. You've got to stop this. You've got to realize you're all connected, and that's what the virus is all about. The virus comes in and says, you can build all the walls you want. You can do whatever you want. It's all one thing. It's all connected, and you can't stop it. And we have to realize we're all interconnected, and that whatever I do to you, whatever I do to an animal, whatever I do to the environment, I do to everything. Just because you're somebody who says, it's World War II and we're not going to, everybody has to turn off their lights in London, I'll turn on my lights if I want. As long as we're into this thing where I'm going to do what I want, I'm more important than the society as a whole, we're doomed. And that's the message they're trying to get across to us. Wake up. You are all connected. And unless you get together and work like the cells of a body, where all the cells are doing the job, if you're going to insist on being an individual and be different than everybody else, and you're going to divide and you're not going to do whatever you want, that becomes a cancer cell. A cancer cell is a cell that goes against everybody else. We have to realize we're cells of a body. We're like the neurons of a brain, that we all have to work together. And that's what nature does. It all works together. We're the only ones that decide, no, we can do whatever we want. We don't have to, we can take over, and we don't have to be part of the thing. That's the message. Love, oneness, and you've got to work together.
Well, what you're explaining is a kind of collective consciousness, which I think some cultures have already, achieved. And they're the ones that can go out into outer space, because they've achieved that. They've gone through the primitive stuff, and they've gone through, and you're brilliant. I can't believe the way that you just went da-da-da-da-da right down the line. I agree with you 1,000%. The love is the glue of the universe. And all the great teachers, all the great masters have had the same message. I mean, they say it in a different way, love your brother as yourself, love God or consciousness first. They've all said it in different ways, but it's very difficult, because this planet could be an experiment in free will. In other words, it could be, that's why it's being watched, as far as it didn't get to the collective conscious stage, doing best for the collective. Yeah. But I love that you brought up the coronavirus, because we have to, or we all die.
Yeah, that you've got to work together. And that you even go back to the whole concept with, first the Canadians said it in 1950. They were told that mental phenomena was part of the flying saucer. And that's before Adamski came forward. That's 2 years before Adamski. That's before anybody talked to an alien. And then you remember the story of Jan Hartson. Jan Hartson is very interested. He has this sighting as a nine-year-old kid, and he gets Ben Rich, who's rumored to be the guy that they're trying to back engineer the stuff at Lockheed. And he says to him, how does it work, Ben? How did it get here? And Ben says, what do you know about ESP? Everything in time and space is connected. That's how it works. That's the idea where you're talking about you're not going to get off the planet until you understand the concept of oneness. There is no time. There is no space. It's all within yourself. It's all one thing. They can move as easily from one place. They're not loading a ship full of food for 1,000 years and flying through space. That doesn't exist. They're coming through, everything is one thing. So they know you can go from here to here instantaneously. I have the one guy in his name is Ron Johnson, that we interviewed a couple of times out of Utah. And he said that they showed him how to fly the craft. And I've got 50 people. I've got the biggest collection of people who have flown the craft. And they all say the same thing. You become one with the craft. The craft is alive. You put your hand on a panel. You put it on a ball. You put it on a wall. And you become one with the craft. And whatever you think is what the craft does. And Ron Johnson was asked, where would you like to go? And he said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. And they said it's going to be very intense for 1 second, a very G-force intensity for 1 second. He said in 1 second, he said, the window, looked out the window, and they were outside the Milky Way looking back. That was 1 second. And that's the whole concept. But you have to understand it's all one thing. As long as you believe there's time and there's space, and we're all matter, and consciousness is an illusion, and we're biological robots in a random, meaningless universe, as long as you have those scientific superstitions, you're doomed, because you're not going to get off the planet, and you're going to destroy the planet. We have to realize that everything is one thing, and we're all interconnected. The beings are connected to us. I'm connected to you. It's all one thing. And we're doomed unless we come to realize how the reality actually works. And that's part of the importance, I guess, of the book on modalities, is it actually tells you, it's the keys to the universe. It tells you how the universe actually works. You're making all of these false assumptions. You're saying it's a random world. It's not a random world. It's a pattern world. You're saying nuts and bolts are the basis of the universe. No, consciousness is the basis of the universe. There's all these different there's all these different things where we're making false assumptions, and we think because it's scientific. But you got to realize that the vast majority of science is like the high priests of the Roman Catholic Church many years ago, is that they are in power, and they are not going to admit that that consciousness is primary. They're not going to admit that all the stuff that they learned in university is wrong, because they're the people that are going to suffer the most, is the real materialist scientists, who are going to have to admit, yes, there is a spirit. Yes, love is the basis of the universe. Matter is not primary. Being one, this communal world is the world we have to go in. There's going to be a lot of opposition to fight against that. And you and I, and only a few people, I maintain, are actually on the path heading that way. And it's up to us to spread the message as best we can in terms of what it is. And if we make it, we make it. If we don't make it, but you and I both have to do what we think is right, because in the end, when you die, they're just gonna, as far as I'm concerned, they're just gonna ask you one question: Paola, how did it work out? Because you planned it. Did you do what you said you were going to do? You can't bring up Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or my mother-in-law or the dog ate my homework. You can't bring any of that kind of stuff up. And the modalities do teach you how the world actually works. And it's this world of oneness and consciousness, and that some people can get in the field. And when you can get somebody who can get in the field and talk to whatever this intelligence is, I think it behooves us to spend a lot of time listening to what they say. And so that's what I do, is I go to experiences and say, what did they tell you? What did they tell you? I don't care what the ship looked like. I don't care how many times you saw it. What did they give you a message? What did they tell you? That's the important part.
You're brilliant. I just love listening to you, because you're right. We can't go backwards. That's the other thing. You and I are already in grad school. I can't go back to elementary school. I can't even talk to people in elementary school anymore. I mean, we've gone through this, and it's been a progression. For me, it was nuts and bolts with Hynek, and it was the physical traces cases and the sightings and all that. And then once I traversed into what this was and accepted that all the I call it paranormal, but it's really normal.
No.
All the normality of the paranormal and the weirdness, whether it be ghosts or, manifestations or weird stuff that happen, is part of the world. And that fear is the only thing that stops people from learning. Fear is the only thing that stops us from progressing. Once you get past that, you and I can't go backwards.
Yeah.
There's no way of going backwards. We got to go forwards, and it gets more and more exciting. I watch you, the way that you operate with all of your, the rabbit hole people and what you do, and it gets more and more, you get more and more stuff. It gets more and more exciting. So this modality book is science in a way. I mean, you put down the modalities of all the samples of the people that you talk to.
Yeah. And the other thing we do in the book, and the book is huge. It's like 450 pages, and we probably could have added another couple hundred pages, but we realized we had to stop. But what the modality book is, we're going to put 100 pages of the book online. And it talks about how does this work. So I go into neurology. I go into actual how the brain actually works, because people have got it totally messed up. And one of the key things that I talk about in the book is called the left brain interpreter. And it's something that is just poison. It is something that neurology is not going to talk about, because what it is, and they did these experiments with split brain people, and this is where skepticism comes from. And what they would do is when they had people who had epilepsy, they'd cut the corpus callosum between the two brains, and the two brains were separate. So you had the female brain, the male brain, the left and the right brain, and they couldn't communicate with each other. And they said it was like two totally different individuals. And the one would light up a cigarette, the other one would take it out and throw the cigarette, and they would be fighting with each other and stuff like that. And what they realized is that what they would do is, because the left brain, the female brain, the one that taps into the paranormal world, cannot talk. But the left brain is the talker. It's the ego. It's the one that's talking all the time. So what they would do is they would tell the right brain, the female brain, to do something. And then they would say to the person, so why did you do that? Why did you pick up that Coke? Why did you walk around? Now you're talking to the left brain, because the female brain can't answer you. It knows why it got up and did this, but the left brain has no idea, because it's completely cut off. It has no information. And what it would do is called left brain interpreter. When the world becomes inconsistent, the left brain makes up stuff. It just says, oh, I was thirsty. That's why I drank the Coke. I heard some bells. That's why I put that bell thing on the answer. It just literally makes up stuff. And they call it the interpreter. So they say, oh, when it becomes inconsistent. So when someone says there's UFOs and you got a regular world, it's suddenly there's a hole in the wall and the world's inconsistent. And what the left brain interpreter does, its job is to instantaneously make up an excuse to make the world consistent. It's just nuts and bolts. Don't worry about it. It's just dust. Orbs are just dust. Don't worry about it. Oh, it's just spider on the lens. And that's what it does. And it does it over and over. And what they discovered, and this is why neurology won't talk about it, because it's so damaging that a lot of the material is coming. It's the skeptics saying, no, it's something else. No, it's this, whatever, making the world, bringing it back to this world that you grew up with that is very nuts and bolts, is that it is always wrong. Always. That was one of the things discovered. So you'll never hear neurology talk about that, but I talk a lot in the book about left brain interpreter and why there's skepticism and what we're up against. And it has really nothing to do with facts, because what you see, Stanton talked about this. Don't bother me with the evidence. My mind is already made up. You've dealt with skeptics. I have as well. That you can do all the research you want. You can work on a book for 2 years and put the book out, and some guy will come up with a left brain interpreter and say, no, it's something else. He's never studied it. He has no idea what you're talking about. In 3 seconds, he can tell you what the answer is. And the other thing they learned about the left brain interpreter, which is in the left brain, is that once it makes a decision, it will not back off. And you know, and I know that skeptics, once they make a decision that it's this or it's that, they will never back off. And that's just it. So I say your left brain interpreter is overactive. You've got a brain problem. And so skepticism, you look at the evidence. It's just like a chess game to me. You sit at the chessboard. You don't have to believe the guy across you is evil. You don't have to believe he's skeptical. You don't have to believe any of that kind of stuff. It's a game. Look at the moves. What is going on? Why is that person moving the pieces? That's all you have to do. It's an investigation. You look at the pieces. Forget about the left brain interpreter making up a bunch of garbage. Just figure out the equation. But a lot of people, it's much easier to say it's dust. It's this. It's swamp gas. That's what got Heineken in so much trouble. Heineken didn't do an investigation. He just said, oh, that's swamp gas. And basically it cost him a lot in his career. But that was left brain interpreter, just coming up with an instantaneous explanation to fill the hole, to make it consistent, so that because if it's not consistent, it's like, oh my God, everything I believed is wrong. And that's what the left brain interpreter does. And it's something that we are up against. But I do a lot of work there's probably 100 pages in the book where we talk about neurology. We talk about how consciousness works. And then the modality part will be the rest. But we're going to put up the theory about how the brain actually works. And so it's based on a lot of science. It's not based on just sort of speculation.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Our time is up, so I can't wait to read the book. We put the cover on the beginning of this. And Grant, I'm just very grateful that you'll talk to me about this, because I'm so much on the same page as you, and you're the only one. It's like you're the professor that went ahead of us You know, you're the only professor that we're all paying attention to in graduate school right now. So thank you so much.
Good. And we'll talk about this in November at your conference, because that's what you're doing, artificial intelligence. And I'll go through the brain, the rat brains that they use to fly F-22 simulators, and I'll go into all that kind of stuff. And it'll be interesting, because you're going down the same road I am, and that's what people need to know. So if they're there in November in Laughlin, this is what we're going to talk about. How does the brain actually work? How does consciousness actually work? And hopefully we'll make some moves away from sort of what I call crazy religious scientific superstitions.
Yes, we will definitely. That's November 6th through 8th at the Aquarius Hotel. I'm so happy to have you there. Thanks a lot, Grant.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paula.
Okay.